BeTheTalk, episode 186, featuring Kristin Smedley. Welcome to BeTheTalk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself, I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Kristin Smedley. Kristin, are you ready to talk?
Oh, Kristin is always ready to talk.
Kristin Smedley is an award-winning nonprofit leader, TEDx speaker, and author, but she never planned on any of that. Kristin did plan to be a great third-grade teacher. However, her personal path to greatness took an unexpected turn when 2 of her 3 children were diagnosed as blind. Kristin had to learn the tools of blindness and build a team of experts that would help her navigate this path that she had not been trained for. Kristin's 2 blind sons are now thriving as gifted high school students, elected student council officials, baseball championship winners, international Braille competition finalists, and social butterflies. Kristin Smedley, welcome to the talk.
Oh, I am ecstatic to be here. Thank you so much. It's an honor to talk with you.
Your recent TEDx Lincoln Square talk is How I Learned to See Through the Eyes of My Son. I know in your talk, you've talked a lot about the lack of role models in the blind community. You mentioned the episode of Little House on the Prairie that I am also very, and many of us in Talk Universe in a certain age demographic, when Mary woke up and she couldn't see anymore. And that was really the only thing that you had to go on. Please, Kristin, take us behind the talk.
Yeah, so I just am one for role models. I mean, I emulate what other people have done. And look, I'm no stranger to not having role models. I grew up back in the 70s, a tomboy. There were no girl athletes. So it wasn't something strange to me to not have a role model. It wasn't so much that I didn't have a role model. It was that it was so outside of my realm of anything I understood to have a child that was blind. So that really set me back in the beginning.
For sure. And, I mean, back in the 70s, so similar demographic, ages as myself. It was a different era back then. Lack of role models, everything else. I think this story and your talk is really about mindset though. It's about,
Absolutely.
When you get that curveball and you have that either diagnosis or you've just given birth, or in your case, I believe, and whatever the case is, and you're expecting and usually feeling one emotion, and then maybe it's mixed with another emotion and unexpected hardships. It's about having that attitude either right then, immediately in the moment, or at some future time that is willing to be growth oriented instead of fixed. What could you speak to in that situation, Kristin?
Yeah, a lot of times now I talk about that. I sort of joke, I'll do air quotes here, that it's not rocket science, it's perception. And what I've learned is when you perceive this as a nightmare, you get a nightmare, right? That's how I perceived it. And it was my little 3-year-old that bounced into the room like, what's your problem? Life is amazing. And I'm thinking, what's your problem? You can't see. How could it be amazing, right? And then I thought, oh, dear God. His perception was he didn't know any better, so I need to get my act together. And honestly, I have taken this to when my husband walked out. I mean, my perception of raising 3 kids alone was Nightmareville. It was girlfriends that survived divorce that nicely, like thrived, said, but look at all this now. Change your perception. Do what you did when Michael changed your perception of blindness. So it really, I always say, not rocket science. Just perception. Look at it differently. Not always easy. I will give you, it's not always easy.
Oh, never easy, I would imagine. So, just reading between the lines with what you said, Kristin, it really took you, year 1, year 2, year 3 for that transformation really in your mind to be complete. What advice do you have for other people? Maybe they don't have 3 years. Maybe they've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. What caused you to choose to embrace the new perception And not that it gets easy, but the perception makes it so much more easy in terms of being able to also receive good things as well as the challenging things. What's your advice for someone in that situation right now?
So I so appreciate that you acknowledge that it doesn't make it easier. It did not get easy. It was hard. It was hard work for 18 years to raise successful blind kids. However, when Michael that day came bouncing in and gave me the aha change in perception, what I realized was things had been happening for 3 years that I didn't notice. There were phenomenal early intervention people coming my way. There were a phenomenal preschool that he was getting into. There were things I just didn't see yet. So when that shift in perception happened, I said, oh my God, I do have some things in place that I can stop the tears every moment. But it also gave me the energy to start having some hope. And hope, as I say a lot, carries you a long way, that this would get better. I knew it wouldn't be easier. It gave me the energy to go out and find the rest of the resources I needed. Now, I say in that moment of surrender to this whole perception, I say in the talk, I did have a one-sided massive tantrum with God and said, look, all right, fine. If this is happening, you better send me every tool and resource. And when my perception shifted, I saw I was open to the resources. Now, I know for certain if I didn't have a change in perception, I would not have gone to the conference that I went to about this rare disease. I wouldn't have gone to meet Eric Weihenmayer, the blind mountain climber. I still would have been stuck. So no, the perception didn't take away blindness. It didn't make my road different, but it did actually make it easier to get out there and find all the tools. And then 18 years later now, as I literally just got off the plane from college orientation where my son's going to be in Nashville and I'm in Philly, and I'm not worried about his blindness. I'm worried about the world and regular things. It was that change in perception though that launched me into being able to go out and get the tools that we both needed.
I think it's funny, and some of it is semantics a little bit. It's very minute, the nuances of it. Really, it doesn't get any easier. It never gets easier. However, we've got to use the tools that we have, which is perception, which is a learning mindset, which is some flexibility, being open instead of closed, being curious instead of maybe angry or judgmental. That can make all the difference between something literally being an impossible situation, mainly because we are part of the obstacle as opposed to using all the tools at our disposal, including ourselves and including our resourcefulness to find solutions for the ones we love. Any thought on that, Kristin?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And that whole, having that different mindset, in my book, I talk about in the opening chapter about the first conference. Remember I said I finally had the energy to go learn. I had to learn about blindness and learn about this disease. I didn't want to. And I talk about how I walked into this conference, and I typically jump into conferences. I love learning. I mean, I'm a teacher, right? I love learning. I did not want to be there. But the long story short, on the right side of the aisle was a family where a girl was teenager and blind and screaming at her parents that they didn't bring the right cookies. Left side is a teenager yelling at his mom about skateboarding, and he's blind. And at that moment, I'm like, I want that family. I want to argue about skateboarding. And it wasn't about skateboarding blind. It was about skateboarding in a hotel is not cool, the mom was saying. She didn't say a word about blindness. And I'm like, that's the family I want to be someday. So it did it. The perception opened my mind. And then I went and found, I'm very open about this. It sounds bad, but I hated Braille. I hated the white cane. I hated every symbol that my son was different and he had a challenge that was hard for me. I hated them. But when I embraced it, I was like, this is how he's going to keep up in school. This is how he's going to go to college someday. This is how he's going to navigate our city. When you embrace it and you learn it, and you know what eliminated? The fear. My fear of blindness was gone. Of course, then I was like, the fear of a high schooler, the fear of what's out there in college, but at least the fear of blindness, and it has all fallen into the background for the most part. But I will add this if I could. I think part of the toolbox has to be patience with yourself and your situation, because there are days when I just can't do it. I mean, Some days, and especially with 2 blind kids and then a teenage girl that's sighted, but hey, she's a teenage girl, right? There are days where I just have to take a break, take a breath, go do something. I'm a soccer player. I'll go kick a ball around and be patient with myself that I'm having a bit of a setback and then come at it again the next day.
Spoken like a true pro. I'm curious about your son. So, if you can go behind their perception for a moment, because they're not sighted, so this is all they've ever known. They've been pros at everything they've done. They're crushing it out there. How do they feel about you? How do they feel about the way that you've responded? This might be a little too personal, but I'm just really curious as to if for someone who's never been sighted, who's able to do all these wonderful things, what is their perception about kind of the struggles that you've had raising them, and which have led to the successful overcoming of which have led to this and other branded talks that you've given?
Well, I will say this now. I'll preface this with my boys are hilarious. They have charisma and humor that's unbelievable, right? When I did this talk, when I rehearsed it, we have a studio kind of thing in our basement because my oldest son is a musician, and I brought in friends as part of my rehearsing in with the microphones and all. I had to read it to my boys first because they didn't know about my big struggle in the first 3 years. I was afraid to let them in on that they would have a negative concept of themselves. And then they thought it was double hilarious that it took me all those years to admit to them that I struggled in the beginning. And I thought, boy, as a mom, what a disservice to my kids. Now I tell them I screw up all the time. I'm like, I'm struggling with this, because I thought what a disservice to them that they didn't know I struggled and overcame it and how I overcame it. So they actually thought it was hilarious that I was on the couch for 3 years because they think blindness is no big deal. That being said, some of their things, like just with Michael at college orientation, he's pretty much the mayor of his ginormous high school. He hasn't struggled with making friends in a long time. And I kind of swooped in here and there, in middle school and set some things up that it wasn't as hard. So he had to just go find people to talk to and get over to the dinner and I watched the color go out of his face at one point. And I talked to him on the plane coming home. I said, how was that for you? And he's like, I'm not going to lie. It sucked. And it's something I haven't had to deal with in a long time. But then the next morning, he figured out a way to get over to the breakfast and had a great time. He overcame that. I mean, they're very resilient, which is a beautiful thing that they've become resilient. Sometimes I don't really care to have them practice so much in resilience, but their perception really is that blindness is no big deal. And if everybody would just actually, Michael says to me all the time, you're so distracted because you're looking around. Shut your eyes and focus, Mom. They think that the world could be much more efficient if nobody could see.
Well, it might.
They have some interesting views.
Totally different perception, and they attend college at different schools.
Well, Michael is my oldest. He'll be going to Belmont and Nashville, and Mitch is still in high school here in Bucks County. Okay.
We've been enjoying this talk with Kristin Smedley. Her talk is called How I Learned to See Through the Eyes of My Sons, and we are going to be back with Kristin Smedley in the Blitz Round in just a moment. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with the Blitz Round and Kristin Smedley. I'm about to ask Kristin a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of her recent branded talk. It happened to be at one of the very most elite TEDx's in Lincoln Square in New York City, so congratulations. First off, were you selected to speak, Kristin, or did you apply?
I was selected.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
I'm a blender.
How did that work for you?
Oh, it was hard because you had to stay on script. Kristin Smedley is not good with on script. And then I was supposed to walk at certain points on the stage, and I said, my ADD will have me falling off the stage. I got to focus on one or the other, So the cameraman just had to keep following me.
Well, and you walk out on the stage. Did you have nerves, or were you in the zone, or neither, or both?
I was a mess. I was a mess because I knew that the message was the most important message I had to deliver at that point in my life. And I took everyone I was serving. I was nervous to do that well. So how did you get through it? I practiced and practiced and practiced and knew that thing forwards, backwards. And my coach that I worked with in New York City had me doing all kinds of how she trains Broadway actors. There's a park in my town that has these massive hills, and I was running up and down those. I was in great shape by the time I did that talk, but I rehearsed. I might know that park because I used to live in Bucks County as well. So beautiful You're
area.
kidding.
Oh no, we'll talk about that offline. But what's a tip, technique, or a tool that helped you? Preparation, absolute preparation, rehearsing. Here's the cut for time question, Kristin. What was the part in your talk that was the most painful that you had to cut out because there wasn't enough time? I would say more elaboration on that, my moment of surrender and change in perception. It was really hard to trim that down and cut a lot out. What is the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk? I don't know if I should say this, but some people might appreciate this. In the very beginning, this was right when my former husband had left and was making things a really big nightmare for me to be there. And I thought he walked in. I thought it was him that walked in while I was 2 minutes into the talk. Oh my. Wow. And I thought, why didn't I think to have somebody blocking that? And then I thought, you know what? It is what it is. Keep going. Because everybody said, oh, if there's a fire, just keep going. If there's this, I'm like, nobody said if that happens, keep going. Well, and what that says to me is, our imaginations, Talk Universe. We're going to do all this stuff. We're going to have the nerves. We're going to go through all of that. Guard your imaginations. Make sure that you focus your imagination in a positive direction to serve the talk, to serve the audience, and to serve yourself. So that you don't, there's enough pressure all the way around, and set up things in advance if you need to, but make sure your imagination is under control, because it can go positive. It can also go other ways. Yeah. What was the biggest challenge of your talk? Sounds like there are several challenges. What would you say was the biggest challenge of them all? It was hard for me to be vulnerable and allow the message of that I did not handle the diagnosis well. Because I feel like my whole life I dreamed of being a mom. I was ready. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I have incredible role models for being moms. I felt like I had let down myself as a mom, that I didn't handle the diagnosis well for 3 years. But I will tell you this. That's the number one reaction I got from moms of all rare diseases, everything, every challenge, that they said the fact that I admitted, and where I am now, because I'm at a place now where people say, Kristin Smedley's the expert, Kristin Smedley's motivational, Kristin Smedley, and then I'm saying I suck, right? For 3 years. And they were like, I can't believe that Kristin Smedley went through that too. So it was hard to be vulnerable like that and admit that I sucked at something like that. I keep saying that. We've been enjoying this talk with Kristin Smedley. It's been the Blitz round, and we've learned a lot from her. We want to let you know where you can go to watch her talk. It's called How I Learned to See Through the Eyes of My Son. And you can also go to YouTube and type that in, or you can go to our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com. We'll have a link for you to be able to click on and watch that. And we'll also have a link to Kristin's website there as well, so you can connect with her as well. In just a moment, we're going to be right back with Kristin Smedley and the final word of advice. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with Kristin Smedley's final word of advice to Talk Universe.
So my final word of advice is, look, it took me 3 years to change my perception. It might not happen right away. You could be 10 years in, you could be 15 years in. When the moment happens, it doesn't matter how long it's taken you. Embrace it and change that perception, and then watch, have your eyes open to the changes.
Kristin Smedley, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.